Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at the psychodynamic approach, which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of approaches. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. The psychodynamic approach has several assumptions including: all behavior can be explained in terms of the inner conflicts of the mind. Freud highlights the role of the unconscious mind, the structure of personality, and the influence that childhood experiences have on later life. Freud believed that the unconscious mind determines most of our behavior and that we are motivated by unconscious emotional drives. Parts of the personality. Freud described personality as tripartite, made up of three parts: the id, ego, and superego. The id operates and is motivated by the pleasure principle and is the primitive and biological, instincts and sexual and aggressive drives, part of the personality. Focuses on the self, selfish, demands instant gratification of its needs, irrational and emotional, deals with feelings and needs, seeks pleasure, hedonistic, formed from birth 18mo, unconscious part of the mind. The ego operates according to the reality principle and mediates between the desires of the id and superego by employing defense mechanisms. Focuses on rationalization and seeks to satisfy the id's desires in a socially acceptable way, formed between 18 months 3 years, conscious part of the mind. The superego operates and is motivated by the morality principle and strives for perfection, judging behaviors and actions, either leading to feelings of price or guilt. It acts as the conscience or moral guide, based on the standards of the child's same-sex parent and parental and societal values, formed between 3 to 6 years, unconscious part of the mind, internalized sense of right and wrong. Experiences and conflicts in childhood shape the development of the three parts, affecting how a person behaves. Each part of the personality comprises of unique features, which interact to form a whole and make relative contributions to an individual's behavior. However, the id and the superego make demands that are incompatible with each other and cause inevitable inner conflict. If the superego is dominant, the individual might develop a neurosis, e.g., depression. If the id is dominant, the individual might develop a psychosis, e.g., schizophrenia. To allow a person to remain mentally healthy and avoid the ego experiencing extreme anxiety, the ego can deploy defense mechanisms to help balance and mediate the demands of the id and superego. Defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, psychological strategies employed by the ego to prevent individuals from becoming overwhelmed by temporary threats or traumas, protecting them from feelings of guilt and shame and helping individuals cope with anxiety, stress and uncomfortable emotions created by unconscious and unresolvable conflicts between the id and superego. However, these strategies often involve some form of distortion of reality, and as a long-term solution they are regarded as psychologically unhealthy and undesirable. Displacement is when the true focus of a strong or distressing emotion is expressed, transferred, or redirected onto a substitute neutral, powerless or alternative target, person or object. This occurs as a result of the id wanting to do something which the superego does not permit, and thus the ego finds an alternative way to release the psychic energy of the id, e.g., being angry with your parents but taking it out in your siblings. Denial is when a person refuses to acknowledge some aspect of unpleasant internal or external reality or facts and carries on with day-to-day life as normal, thereby blocking external events from awareness and avoiding uncomfortable feelings, e.g. losing your job, but carrying in with daily routines as normal. Repression, motivated forgetting, is when a depressing, distressing, threatening, or traumatic memory or thought is involuntarily forced or pushed out of conscious awareness and mind and cannot be recalled, e.g. sexual or aggressive urges or painful childhood memories, but may appear through subconscious means and in altered forms, such as dreams or slips of the tongue, Freudian slips. Projection is when a person attributes their own unacceptable and unwanted thoughts, feelings, or motives onto another person, seeing their own unacceptable desires in other people, thereby externalizing undesirable aspects of the self, protecting their self-esteem, e.g. hating someone, but believing they hate you. Regression is when a person reverts to an earlier stage of development in response to stressful situations. This allows a person to retreat and psychologically go back in time to a period when the person felt safer, e.g. when a person is troubled or frightened, their behavior may become more childish or primitive, for example, sticking their tongue out, wetting the bed and giggling when being introduced to the opposite sex. Sublimation is when a person manages to displace their unacceptable emotions into behaviors which are constructive and socially acceptable, rather than destructive activities. This is a value-laden concept, based on the aspirations of European society at the end of the 1800th century, e.g. a fixation at the anal stage may cause a person to sublimate their desire to handle feces with an enjoyment of pottery. Rationalization is when a person justifies their behaviors or feelings with cognitive distortion of the facts to avoid the truth and make an event or an impulse less threatening, e.g. a person may explain a natural disaster as God's will. Reaction formation is when a person adopts conscious and exaggerated behaviors that are opposite to the way they think or feel to overcompensate for their anxiety a person feels regarding their socially unacceptable unconscious thoughts or emotions, e.g. a daughter who loves her mother is reacting to her Electra hatred of her mother, or a son who views his father as a role model is reacting to his Oedipus hatred of his father. Introjection, identification, is when a person takes on the personality characteristics of someone else, because doing so solves some emotional difficulty, e.g. a child who is neglected may try to act in some way to become a parent and tell their toys not to be afraid. Identification with the aggressor is when a person, or victim, adopts the negative and feared traits or behaviors of a person who is more powerful and hostile towards them. By internalizing the behavior of the aggressor, the victim hopes to avoid abuse, as the aggressor may begin to feel an emotional connection with the victim, which leads to feelings of empathy, e.g. Stockholm Syndrome, where hostages establish an emotional bond with their captors and takes on their behaviors. Psychosexual stages. Freud proposed that there are 5 psychosexual developmental stages: oral, anal, phallic, latency and genital. Each stage is marked by a different unconscious conflict, which the child must resolve and overcome successfully in order to progress on to the next stage. Any psychosexual conflict that is unresolved leads to fixation, where the child becomes stuck and carries certain behaviors associated with that stage throughout adulthood and life, affecting an adult's personality. Oral, 0 to 1 years, focus of pleasure is the mouth and the child gains pleasure from sucking on the mother's breast and swallowing. The consequences of unresolved conflicts include smoking, nail biting, dependency, aggression, sarcasm and critical. These conflicts could stem from force feeding, deprivation, or early weaning. Anal, 1 to 3 years, focus of pleasure is the anus and the child gains pleasure from withholding and expelling feces. The consequences of unresolved conflicts include anal retentive, perfectionism, obsessiveness, meanness and tidiness, and anal expulsive, thoughtless, untidiness and messy. These conflicts could stem from too harsh or too lax toilet training. Phallic, 3 to 6 years, focus of pleasure is the genitals, penis and clitoris, and the child gains pleasure from masturbation. Children also experience the Oedipus or Electra complex. The consequences of unresolved conflicts include a phallic personality, where a person is narcissistic, self-obsessed, inadequate, inferior, reckless and homosexual. They may also experience sexual anxiety and envy. These conflicts could stem from abnormal family setups that lead to an unusual relationship with the mother or father. Latency, 6 to 12 years, previous conflicts and sexual drives are resolved or repressed, and early years are largely forgotten. Fixation does not happen at this stage. Genital, 12 years puberty adulthood, sexual desires become conscious with the onset of puberty and the adult derives pleasure from masturbation and sexual intercourse. The consequences of unresolved conflicts include difficulties forming heterosexual relationships. The Oedipus complex, Freud claimed that little boys develop incestuous intense sexual feelings towards their mother and because of this, develop a murderous hatred towards their rival for their mother's love, their father. However, due to the boy's father being far bigger and more powerful than him, the boy develops a fear that his father will castrate him, and because it is impossible to live with the continual castration threat anxiety provided by this conflict, the young boy develops a defense mechanism known as identification with the aggressor for coping with it, leading to the boy repressing his feelings for his mother and identifying with his father, taking on his gender role, moral values, attitudes, mannerisms and actions, feeling that if his father sees him as similar, he will not feel hostile towards him. The Electra complex, proposed by Freud's protégé, Carl Jung, 1963, claimed that little girls develop an unconscious sexual attachment to their fathers and become increasingly hostile toward their mothers because they believe that their mothers have already castrated them. They blame their mothers for this and experiences penis envy. For girls to develop their superego and female sex role, they need to identify with the mother. But the girl's motivation for giving up her father as a love object in order to move back to her mother is much less obvious than the boy's for identifying with his father. As a consequence, girls' identification with their mothers is less complete than boys with their fathers. In turn, this makes the female superego weaker, and their identity as separate, independent people less developed. The role of the unconscious mind. There are three parts of the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is responsible for awareness of the present moments and the ability to think, reason, and make decisions. It allows us to perceive and interact with the world around us, and it plays a crucial role in our sense of self and identity. This information can be accessed without any effort. The preconscious mind acts as a storage place for thoughts, feelings, and memories that are not currently in our conscious awareness but can be easily retrieved when needed, although does require some effort. It serves as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, allowing us to access information and experiences that are not always at the forefront of our thoughts. The unconscious mind is responsible for thoughts, feelings, memories, and desires that are outside our conscious awareness but still influence our actions, behavior, and personality. This can include biological and sexual motivating drives, instincts and forces that affect decisions, emotions, and relationships, and disturbing and threatening memories that have been repressed, locked away or forgotten in order to protect the conscious self from anxiety, fear, trauma, and conflict, although can be accessed during dreams or through slip of the tongue, parapraxis. The unconscious mind uses defense mechanisms, e.g. repression, denial, displacement to unconsciously reduce anxiety and help the ego manage the conflict between the ID and the superego. This information cannot be accessed without the help of a trained psychoanalyst. Psychodynamic evaluation. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it is supported by clinical case study research. Freud supported his concept of the Oedipus complex with his case study of Little Hans. Freud's aim was to treat Little Hans' phobia whilst exploring what other factors might have led to the development of the phobia and its remission. Little Hans, a 5-year-old, developed a phobia of horses after seeing one collapse. Freud, through correspondence with Hans's father, suggested the phobia was a displacement of Hans's repressed fear of his father, linked to the Oedipus complex. Hans's interest in Whittlers and his mother's threat to cut off his penis tied into Freud's interpretation of the horse's large penis symbolizing his fear of his father. Freud concluded that Hans's phobia was a displaced fear of his father, resolved by fantasizing about marrying his mother and identifying with his father, thus overcoming castration anxiety. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach has real-world applications in understanding and treating psychological disorders. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it is supported by scientific research. Fisher and Greenberg, 1996, concluded after examining over 2,500 studies that psychoanalysis compared well with other psychological studies and there appeared to be support for unconscious motivations in behavior as well as the existence of defense mechanisms such as repression, denial, and displacement. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach has some empirical validity and is not solely based on subjective interpretations or anecdotal evidence. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it has led to the development of psychotherapies. The psychodynamic approach made the first attempt to treat mental disorders psychologically instead of physically through the process of psychoanalysis. The therapy employed a range of techniques designed to access and interpret the unconscious mind, e.g. via dream analysis, free association. Psychoanalysis claims to help clients by bringing their repressed emotions into their conscious mind so they can be dealt with, and has been successful in treating mild neuroses with Demat et al.'s 2009, conducting a large-scale review and finding significant maintained improvement after treatment. Psychotherapies have also led to the establishment of modern-day talking therapies, such as counseling. This is a strength because it suggests that Freud's psychodynamic approach has made a long-lasting contribution towards the treatment of various mental disorders. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that treatments, e.g. psychotherapies, developed from the approach have been regarded as inappropriate and harmful for people experiencing more serious mental disorders, such as schizophrenia. Many of the symptoms of schizophrenia, such as paranoia and delusional thinking, mean that those with the disorder have lost their grip on reality and cannot articulate their thoughts in the way required by psychoanalysis. This is a limitation because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach may not be suitable for all individuals, particularly those with severe mental disorders like schizophrenia, due to the nature of their symptoms and the demands of psychodynamic therapies. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that there is research to suggest that psychoanalytic therapies have a limited effect. Eysenck, 1952, conducted a meta-analysis of thousands of psychoanalytic patients and found it appeared to work for 66% of the patients. However, when compared to a control group of patients who received no therapy, 70% of people suffering from mental illness without intervention also showed improvement. This is a limitation because it suggests that the explanation lacks validity as an approach to explaining mental illnesses. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it has practical real-world application. Psychoanalysis is able to explain aspects of human behavior outside the realm of psychology. Psychoanalysis can be used to question and understand the meaning of people's behavior through analyzing people's work. It has been used as a form of literary criticism in literature such as Hamlet, where repressed messages are hidden beneath the surface of the text. Interpretation allows for an insight into the character's mind as well as Shakespeare's own psyche. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach has a wide range of applications beyond clinical settings, offering valuable insights into human behavior and motivations in various fields, such as literature. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it has good explanatory power. Freud's theories have the ability to explain human behavior. The theory has had a huge influence on psychology and Western contemporary thought. Alongside behaviorism, the psychodynamic approach remained a key force in psychology for the first half of the 20th century and has been used to explain a wide range of phenomena including personality development, abnormal behavior, moral development, and gender identity. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach has been influential in shaping our understanding of various aspects of human behavior and has had a lasting impact on the field of psychology. A strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it led to positive impacts on developmental psychology. Freud was arguably the first person to highlight the importance of childhood in mental health. His approach drew significant attention to the connection between experiences in childhood, such as relationship with parents, and later development in adulthood and personality. These connections are now common in many other psychological theories, such as Bowlby's continuity hypothesis and the double-bind explanation of schizophrenia. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach has been influential in shaping our understanding of the importance of childhood experiences on later development and has laid the groundwork for many other psychological theories. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that it is not scientific. Freud's theory has been described as a pseudoscience, not scientific, because it fails to meet the criteria of the features of a science, as a science is something that can be observed, measured, and repeated. The theory is unfalsifiable as it is not open to empirical testing and cannot be disproved, as many of Freud's concepts, such as the LD and the Oedipus complex, occur at an unconscious level, making them difficult, if not impossible, to test, as they are not observable by from an individual and are not measurable in a laboratory. If a person behaves in a way predicted by the theory, it is viewed as support. If a person behaves in a way that opposes the theory, it is argued that they are using defense mechanisms, which lack testability, as defense mechanisms are unconscious processes that cannot be studied directly and can only be inferred from behavior or from reported thoughts or experiences. This is a limitation because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach may not be as reliable or valid as other approaches in psychology due to its lack of empirical evidence and testability. Interactionism. The psychodynamic approach is that it takes an interactionist approach to explaining human behavior. The approach takes both a naturist approach assuming that behavior is the result of innate biological drives, e.g. sex and aggression, and unconscious forces, e.g. ID, ego, superego, and dynamics, as well as an empiricist approach assuming that coping mechanisms such as defense mechanisms and behavior arise from experience, including social and cultural environment, and are shaped by early childhood experiences. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach offers a more comprehensive understanding of human behavior by considering both innate factors and environmental influences, rather than focusing solely on one aspect. Reductionism and holism. The psychodynamic approach takes both a reductionistic and holistic approach to explaining human behavior. The approach views individuals as integrated beings where conscious and unconscious processes are interconnected, and symptoms are understood within the context of a person's entire life story, whilst also reducing behavior to innate drives and breaking the psyche into components of ID, ego, and superego, although these are seen as interdependent parts of a whole rather than isolated elements. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach balances the need to understand specific components of the psyche with the importance of viewing the individual as a whole, interconnected being, offering a more complete and context-rich understanding of human behavior. Nomothetic and ideographic. The psychodynamic approach takes both a nomothetic and ideographic approach to explaining human behavior. The approach creates general laws about innate drives, and Freud argued that human behavior is governed by universal processes that apply to everyone, e.g. the tripartite structure of the mind, nomothetic, whilst also taking into account the unique and early childhood experiences, ideographic. This is a strength because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach offers a comprehensive understanding of human behavior by integrating universal principles with individual experiences, providing both generalizable insights and personalized interpretations. Determinism. The psychodynamic approach is that it takes a psychic deterministic approach. The approach suggests that behavior is determined by unconscious drives and motives and internal conflicts between the ID and the superego, whilst being mediated by the ego, which are shaped by biological and innate drives and early childhood experiences that are beyond conscious control. Freud believed there is no such thing as an accident, and every action has some kind of meaning and can give some type of insight into the unconscious, even slips of the tongue. This is a limitation because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach may not fully account for the conscious choices and free will that individuals have in shaping their behavior, potentially overemphasizing the influence of unconscious factors. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that it breaks ethical guidelines. In psychodynamic therapies, such as psychoanalysis, the therapist interprets and emotionally reacts to the patient's unconscious thoughts and feelings using their own unconscious feelings and attitudes, countertransference, which can be influenced by their own past experiences and unresolved issues. This could cause boundary violations, where the therapist may become overly involved or distant, compromising the therapeutic frame, therapeutic impasse, where unrecognized countertransference leads to a stalemate in therapy, as the therapist's unresolved issues can hinder their ability to respond effectively to the client. This could also lead to psychological harm to the client, as the unmanaged countertransference could result in harm to the client, either through direct actions or through the therapist's inability to provide an effective therapeutic response. This is a limitation because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach prioritizes unconscious idealizations over the well-being and safety of people and potential clients. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that it is socially sensitive. The approach focuses on unconscious motives and childhood experiences, which can sometimes lead to stigmatization or misunderstanding of individuals' behaviors. For instance, if a therapist interprets a client's issues as rooted solely in their early familial relationships, this perspective may overlook the influence of broader societal factors, such as culture, socioeconomic status, or current life circumstances. This is a limitation because it suggests that the psychodynamic approach inadvertently places undue blame on individuals and their pasts, potentially overlooking the impact of social and environmental factors on their present behavior and mental health, which could lead to stigmatization or a lack of comprehensive understanding. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that it suffers from gender bias. Freud's psychosexual stages, especially the Oedipus complex and Electra complex, are heavily focused on male development, with female development often seen as a deviation from the male norm. For example, Freud suggested that girls experience penis envy, implying that they feel inferior due to their lack of a penis, which is a highly controversial and arguably sexist concept. This is a limitation because it suggests that the theory does not accurately and fairly represent female psychological development, potentially leading to misunderstandings or misinterpretations of women's experiences. A limitation of the psychodynamic approach is that it suffers from cultural bias. Psychoanalysts assume mental disorders are due to traumatic memories which are locked in the unconscious, and freeing them through psychotherapy helps individuals deal with their issues better. However, the case studies for which Freud founded this approach on were based on people from Western backgrounds. Other cultures do not value such insight in the same way. For example, people in China prefer to avoid distressing thoughts and ignore discussing them, which is a major contrast to Western viewpoints which believe in open discussion and insight. This is a limitation because it suggests that the effectiveness of psychodynamic therapy varies across different cultures, and its core principles might not be universally applicable due to differing cultural values and attitudes towards mental health and emotional expression. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.